What happens when Hollywood's most respected action hero meets late-night television's most relentless provocator, and things go completely sideways tonight? We're diving into one of the most explosive celebrity interviews ever recorded, where Harrison Ford's legendary composure finally cracked under Jimmy Kimmel's relentless questioning. Before we get into this incredible story, make sure you hit that subscribe button and drop a comment below, telling me which celebrity meltdown you want to see covered next. Trust me, you're going to want to stick around for every single moment of this train wreck. The Hollywood Hills were buzzing with anticipation as Harrison Ford's black sedan pulled up to the Jimmy Kimmel Live studio lot, fresh off promoting his latest project. Ford had agreed to what was supposed to be a standard late-night appearance. The 78-year-old actor wearing his signature casual blazer and looking every bit the movie star. He'd been for decades walked through the backstage corridors with the quiet confidence that had made him a legend. But Jimmy Kimmel had other plans. As Ford settled into the guest chair, adjusting his jacket and offering that familiar half-smile to the audience, Kimmel was already setting his trap. The host's research team had been digging, and they'd uncovered some old interviews and behind-the-scenes stories that most people had forgotten about, stories that Ford had hoped would stay buried. "Harrison Ford, everybody," Kimmel announced to thunderous applause. "Thanks for being here, man. I have to say, you look great for someone who's been dodging death on movie sets for 40 years. Ford chuckled, settling back in his chair. "Well, Jim, when you love what you do, it doesn't feel like work." Speaking of work, Kimmel's tone shifted slightly, that mischievous glint appearing in his eyes. "I was reading some old interviews from the Star Wars days, and I found something really interesting. Apparently, you once told a reporter that you thought Han Solo should have died in The Empire Strikes Back because, and I quote, the character had no growth left and was becoming a burden to the story." The audience murmured, sensing the shift in energy. Ford's smile tightened almost imperceptibly. "Jimmy, that was taken out of context. I was discussing character arcs and storytelling structure with a film student. It wasn't meant to be some grand statement about the franchise." But Kimmel wasn't backing down. He leaned forward, his voice taking on that mock serious tone he used when he was about to go for the jugular. "But here's what's fascinating to me, Harrison. You've made a career out of playing characters that you apparently don't really connect with. Han Solo. You wanted dead Indiana Jones. You've called him repetitive in interviews. Even Rick Deckard from Blade Runner. You've said publicly that you didn't understand the character's motivations." Ford's jaw tightened. The audience was dead silent, now sensing the tension building between the two men. "Jimmy, I think you're mischaracterizing my comments as an actor. Part of your job is to constantly question and challenge the material. That doesn't mean I don't respect these roles or the fans who love them." "But doesn't it, though?" Kimmel pressed, his voice getting louder. "I mean, we have decades of interviews where you seem almost embarrassed by the characters that made you famous. It's like you're ashamed of the very thing that put you on the map." Ford shifted in his chair, his hands gripping the armrests. "Jimmy, I think we should probably move on to talking about my current project." "Oh, we'll get to that," Kimmel said with a wave of his hand. "But I'm really curious about this pattern, because it's not just the characters, is it? I found this interview from 1997 where you called the whole blockbuster system a quote-unquote machine that churns out mediocrity for the masses." The color was starting to drain from Ford's face. This wasn't the friendly chat he'd been promised by his publicist. That quote was about the industry in general, not about any specific films or the people who work on them, right? But you worked on those films. Harrison, you were part of that machine, so when you call it mediocrity for the masses, aren't you essentially calling your own work mediocrity? Ford's voice dropped to that dangerous, quiet tone that anyone who'd seen his movies would recognize. "Jimmy, I came here to talk about my new film, not to relitigate every interview I've given over the past 4 decades." But Kimmel sensed blood in the water. The audience was completely captivated watching this slow-motion car crash unfold in real time. "I'm just trying to understand the disconnect, Harrison, because on one hand, you've made hundreds of millions of dollars playing these characters that you seem to have such complicated feelings about, and on the other hand, you've spent years in interviews subtly criticizing the very thing that made you wealthy and famous." Ford's knuckles were white now as he gripped the chair. "You know what, Jimmy? I think there's been a misunderstanding about what kind of interview this was going to be. This is exactly the kind of interview it was always going to be." Kimmel shot back, his voice rising. You come on these shows, you give the same canned answers about craft and process, but you never actually engage with the reality of your career. You never acknowledge the contradiction. What contradiction Ford's voice was getting? Dangerously quiet. The contradiction of being one of the biggest movie stars in the world, while simultaneously acting like you're above the thing that made you a movie star. The studio was so quiet, you could hear the cameras whirring. Ford stared at Kimmel for a long moment, and anyone watching could see the exact moment when his famous patience finally ran out. You want to talk about contradictions? Jimmy Ford's voice cut through the silence like a blade. Let's talk about contradictions. You make your living mocking people who are actually out there creating something, taking risks, putting themselves on the line. What exactly have you created? Besides a platform to tear other people down? Kimmel's smug expression faltered for just a moment, but he quickly recovered. I create entertainment, Harrison comedy. I make people laugh. Do you? Ford leaned forward, now his famous intensity fully engaged. Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you make people laugh at other people's expense. There's a difference between comedy and cruelty, and you seem to have trouble telling them apart. The audience was riveted. This was not the Harrison Ford they were used to seeing, calm and measured and diplomatic. This was raw, unfiltered anger from a man who'd clearly had enough. Oh, come on, Kimmel scoffed. But there was a nervous edge to his voice. Now you can't be serious. You're one of the most successful actors in Hollywood history. You think a few jokes are going to hurt your feelings? This isn't about jokes, Jimmy. This is about respect, and you clearly don't have any respect. Kimmel's voice cracked slightly. You want to talk about respect? You've spent your entire career acting like you're too good for the roles that made you famous? Like you're some serious dramatic actor who got stuck doing adventure movies? Meanwhile, millions of people around the world love those characters and you treat them like they're beneath you. Ford's eyes were blazing. Now, I have never ever treated the fans with anything but gratitude and respect. But there's a difference between respecting the fans and pretending that every creative decision was perfect, that every script was Shakespeare, that every movie was a masterpiece. But that's exactly my point. Kimmel pressed his voice, getting shrill. You can't have it both ways. You can't take the paycheck and the fame and then spend decades suddenly undermining the very thing that gave it to you. I'm not undermining anything. Ford snapped, I'm being honest about the creative process. I'm treating the audience like adults who can handle the fact that making movies is complicated, that actors sometimes disagree with directors, that not every moment on set is magical, but you go beyond that, don't you? Kimmel's voice was getting nastier now, all pretense of comedy gone. You've made it clear in dozens of interviews that you think these blockbuster movies are somehow beneath your artistic integrity. Show me one interview where I said that I don't need to show you. Harrison, everyone watching knows exactly what I'm talking about. The eye rolls when people ask about Star Wars, the visible discomfort when you have to talk about Indiana Jones. The way you light up only when you get to discuss your smaller, more serious films. Ford was on his feet now, towering over Kimmel's desk. You know what your problem is? Jimmy, you think you understand people based on edited clips and out-of-context quotes. You think you can reduce 40 years of someone's career to a few sound bites that fit your narrative. I think I understand when someone is being fake. Kimmel shot back, standing up to meet Ford's energy, and you've been fake for decades. Fake enthusiasm, fake gratitude, fake humility. Fake. Ford's voice was dangerously quiet again. You want to know what's fake? This whole setup, you invite me here under false pretenses, ambush me with gotcha questions, and then act like I'm the problem when I don't play along with your little game. The audience was completely silent now, watching this confrontation escalate beyond anything they'd ever seen on late-night television. Kimmel's producers were frantically gesturing from the wings, but neither man was backing down. It's not a game, Harrison. It's called accountability. You're a public figure who's made hundreds of millions of dollars off the public's goodwill, and you've spent years subtly showing contempt for the very people who made you rich and famous. Contempt. Ford's voice was getting louder. Now you want to see contempt. This is contempt, what you're doing right now. Twisting someone's words, attacking their character, attempting to humiliate them on national television for your own amusement. I'm asking legitimate questions about legitimate contradictions in your public statements. No, you're not. You're bullying. You're using your platform to attack someone who can't fight back on equal footing. Because this is your show, your audience, your rules. Kimmel's face was flushed now, his carefully constructed TV persona abandoned entirely. If you can't take tough questions, maybe you shouldn't do interviews. Tough questions, Ford laughed bitterly. These are not tough questions, Jimmy. These are cheap shots designed to make you appear clever at my expense. A tough question would be about craft, about choices, about the work itself. This is just tabloid crap masquerading as journalism. Everything I've brought up is from your own interviews, your own words taken out of context, edited for maximum controversy, presented in the worst possible light. That's not journalism, that's character assassination. The tension in the studio was electric. Kimmel's band leader was staring in shock. The audience was utterly silent, and you could see the panic on the faces of the production staff. You know what? I think Harrison Kimmel's voice was venomous. Now I think you're angry because someone finally called you out on your act, the humble movie star routine, the Ashucks Midwestern guy, who just happened to become famous. It's all calculated, isn't it? Ford stared at him for a long moment, and when he spoke, his voice was deadly calm. You really want to do this, Jimmy. You want to make this personal, fine. Let's make this personal. The words hung in the air like a loaded gun. Ford's eyes were cold as steel, and for the first time since this whole confrontation started, Kimmel looked genuinely uncomfortable. You want to talk about calculated, Jimmy? Let's talk about your career. You started as a radio shock jock, making prank calls to random people for laughs. Then you moved to television, where you built your entire brand on humiliating celebrities and ordinary people alike. The Man Show, where you objectified women for cheap laughs. Jimmy Kimmel, Live, where you've spent 2 decades perfecting the art of the ambush interview. Kimmel's face was redder by the second. That's completely different, and it is. Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you've made a fortune being cruel to people who can't fight back. At least when I play a character. I'm trying to entertain people when you attack people. You're just feeding off their discomfort for your own benefit. I don't attack people. I ask hard questions. Hard questions. Ford's voice dripped with contempt. Jimmy, I've been asked hard questions. I've been interviewed by real journalists. People who actually understand the craft, who dig deep into